We got a bullpen coming up now. Here it is. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the bullpen. In the bullpen today, we have Sam Sorbo, actress, TV host, and author of Words for Warriors. Sam, good day, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me.
We appreciate you being on the show. I want to make a note. You also studied biomedical engineering at Duke University before pursuing a career in modeling.
True.
All right.
Guilty as charged.
We're going to chop it up about a few things. Maybe we get to everything: critical race theory, mask mandates, vaccine protocols, etc. I don't want to presume what you know or believe about critical race theory. So if you would, give us your sentiment as it relates to CRT.
My sentiment about CRT is it convinces young children that they are inherently racist, and I find that very sad.
Now, where did you get that definition from?
Just from what I've read about how they are training critical race theory in our schools today.
All right, and what is critical race theory?
I beg your pardon?
What is critical race theory? What is the theoretical framework?
The framework is that it teaches young people that they are inherently racist, basically that the United States is inherently a racist nation.
You're incorrect on the teaching of critical race theory. Critical race theory actually de-emphasizes the individual racist person. So it cannot, by structure and design, teach that individual racist people are the problematic variable. It actually de-emphasizes individuality in the construct of the theory itself. The other part is that critical race theory is not taught in K through 12 education. It is an advanced theoretical construct that is taught typically in advanced level studies. Even if you are an undergraduate collegiate studies, you do not take critical race theory. Typically that's for master's, doctoral, and even some JD programs. When you look at,
well, then I'm not sure why teachers are complaining that they are taking critical race theory away from them and insisting that they will teach it regardless. Maybe your understanding of critical race theory isn't the same as many of the teachers out there.
No, you're incorrect on that. School teachers are very aware of what critical race theory is, and they say very proudly and boldly, we don't teach critical race theory inside of our school system. That's why.
And yet some of them say that they will. So,
madam, I'm gonna explain to you what you're conflating. Okay, critical race theory is not even a phraseology used in the legislation passed by these Republican lawmakers. The terminology critical race theory is not even in the bill that quote unquote bans critical race theory. They're not banning critical race theory. They don't say it in the legislation. They say it at the press conference, but it's not in the legislation because the legislation does something else. Let me bring your attention to Texas. Are you familiar with the Texas bill that said it is banning the teaching of critical race theory, even though CRT is not in the confines of the statutory doctrine? Are you aware of the Texas legislation?
I've heard about it.
All right, so in the Texas legislation, what it does is it stops the teacher's ability from teaching things like the KKK being morally wrong. What the bill says is that teachers can still teach these dynamics of white supremacy and racism as it relates to the KKK, but they can no longer give deference in the teaching, meaning they cannot teach it as a moral wrong. They've also utilized their critical race theory ban, which by the way, CRT is not in the legislation itself, in order to stop certain books that have Rosa Parks, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and other legacy individuals being taught inside of the school system. So here's what has happened, and I'm glad you're on the show because I get an opportunity to educate you on the facts. They're not banning critical race theory because critical race theory is not taught in K through 12 education. Did you learn critical race theory in school?
No.
Do you have children?
I do.
Did they learn critical race theory in school?
My children don't go to public school.
Do you have friends that have children in public schools?
Some.
Are their children learning critical race theory?
I've heard of some.
They're learning an advanced level theoretical construct?
They're learning what we generally term as critical race theory. You can parse your words and you can say, well, that's not actually what critical race theory is, but there is something now currently in the vernacular, and there are teachers who espouse it, and it is called critical race theory.
But it's not.
Okay.
It's not. It's not. If it's not critical race theory being taught, it's not critical race theory. That's like saying, well, they're teaching calculus just because they're teaching math. No, if you're teaching math, that doesn't mean you're teaching calculus, okay? Critical race theory is an advanced theoretical construct. Students aren't even, typically K through 12 students aren't even, they're not advanced enough or have the capacity, intellectual capacity to learn variables that are associated with advanced frameworks like CRT or critical thinking or any other framework, grounded theory, etc. So this is the challenge that I have with people who say, okay, we got to ban critical race theory. First of all, nobody was even talking about critical race theory before roughly 2018, 2017. It was not this big evil. So you mean to tell me that all of a sudden school teachers within the last 4 years, they started teaching critical race theory? They got trained on this? I'm talking about lifelong educators all of a sudden started teaching CRT.
No, I think that because of COVID, parents finally started to wake up to a lot of the different directives that are being taught in our schools, not just critical race theory.
Okay, once again, critical race theory is not taught in K through 12 education. Do you know how long?
Why are they arguing that they have to keep teaching it? Okay.
Ma'am, once again, they're arguing against eliminating levels of education that deal with the reality of America. It's not critical race theory to teach that the KKK is evil. That's not critical race theory.
No, of course not. My
That's
goodness, no.
However, Republicans, your people, they passed a law saying that teachers, one, they're not required to teach it as they were before. And two, if they do teach about the KKK, they cannot teach that they are morally wrong in history. Is that fair for students?
But what I'm wondering is why there are teachers, and these are teachers, these are educators who are insisting that they will teach critical race theory.
No, ma'am,
what
that's
do you
not
make
what they're
about
saying.
those
I need
people?
you to go back. I need you to do some research on this. Teachers are not protesting to teach critical race theory. They don't know. They don't know critical race theory for the most part. That's not something they were trained in. They were trained on history. They were trained on American government.
They know it. They're the educators, and they think that they know it.
Ma'am, listen to me, please. I'm trying to make a point because I think you are authentically misguided and genuinely believe what you're saying. I don't think you're grifting or anything else.
Why would I say something that I don't believe?
I'm a former high school teacher. My mother is still a current high school teacher. I'm a current college professor. I teach critical race theory. I've taught it since 2016. School systems do not teach critical race theory. What you see teachers talking about and protesting is that state governments have now limited their ability to teach true history in America that deal with racial dynamics, not critical race theory. That's what you see happening. That is the protest. It's not about CRT. They never taught CRT. And the only evidence that you need to examine to show that I'm telling you the truth, simply review the legislation that has been deemed anti-critical race theory legislation. And what you will find missing is the terminology critical race theory.
Well, sure, I did, and I've seen it actually, and I know that the terminology is missing, but the terminology is just something that we've adopted as a catch-all in order to be able to refer to this kind of teaching with a single word or a phrase. But I think that generally speaking, that the teaching is that you as a Black person are a victim, and I, who identify as a white person, are an oppressor, and that is the paradigm that the legislation seeks to ameliorate.
Okay.
Although frankly, between you and me, I think that they're probably misguided in trying to put that legislation in. Teachers gonna teach, they're gonna teach what they believe, and they're gonna get across their points to their students as best they can.
Let me ask you a question. Now let's jump from K through 12 education because really, I've explained that as best as I could to you. So let's talk about critical race theory as it is, okay? Critical race theory teaches that there are institutional biases that exist based on the ways our laws, systems, institutions were developed. Do you disagree with that premise?
Yeah, I don't think that institutions can be biased. Okay. I don't think structures can be biased.
Okay, let me give an example. When the US Constitution was written, it wrote that I was 3/5 of a person. It also did not include institutionally women having the ability to participate in democracy. That was statutory and constitutional.
It didn't address democracy whatsoever. Go ahead.
But ma'am, my point remains the same. That is institutional, that's constitutional, and literally biases were written inside of the US Constitution that were antithetical to black people and antithetical to women. Only rich white men or white men that own property could participate in the republic or democracy, however you want to coin it. That is an institutional bias. Do you see that?
Well, what do you make of amendments?
Ma'am, they were there to correct the institutional biases. But you just made my point that in order to correct an institutional bias, you must first admit one exists.
But once you admit it exists and correct it, it's no longer there.
So you do admit that there are institutional biases created in America.
Well, I admit that some of the founding documents seem like they were biased, absolutely, because they enabled a certain class of citizen, and that was incorrect, absolutely.
Okay. Also, the Declaration of Independence referred to Native Americans as savages. That's actually in the language of the Declaration of Independence. Once again, bias inside of the institution. Now,
well, it depends on how you define the word savage. I mean,
we know how
many of the Native Americans were quite savage.
We know, so were white people.
And?
Exactly.
So you're not against using the word savage, so.
You see what you just did, right? So you bring up some Native Americans were savages as a justification for them being called savages in the Declaration of Independence. Then when I remind you
I wouldn't say
that savagery of white people, you say and?
No, I say and because you're making my point for me.
No, ma'am.
You're okay with using the word savage. You just
white people call themselves savage.
Objecting to where it's applied?
I'm objecting to the fact that a government document refers to a group of individuals that were raped, land stolen, they were murdered, till a trail of tears, etc., to refer to them as savages, written by savages. You have to find irony there, do you not?
Irony that savages wrote about savages?
Not about really. What they called savages.
I beg your pardon?
Did they call themselves savages?
That I don't know, but certainly not in that document. That would be ridiculous.
Were there white people who were savage?
Always.
Where's the document in the government saying it?
Why would there be? That's ridiculous.
Exactly. That's called institutional bias. The bias itself is institutional because of the men who wrote it.
No.
That doesn't make sense to you at all. The fact that they will call Native Americans that they.
No, an institution is just that. It's a structure. It can't be biased or not biased. It's a structure. Now, how it's implemented is where the bias results. And so the way that they implemented it, because they enabled certain people and disabled other people, that's where you find your bias. Once that bias is corrected, it's no longer there. So the idea is not to tear down the entire institution by saying, well, it started out with some biases. The idea is to correct them and improve and move forward.
That is actually
that's what I call progress.
That's great. That's actually what we call critical race theory. Critical race theory seeks to examine what you just said. It first analyzes the fact that there are institutional biases that exist in their origin or original documentation. You just said the very same thing. That reform needs to take place. You called it amendments, they call it reform, and there are a few other titles. You believe the same thing. Critical race theory is not an answer. Critical race theory is a mode or method for analysis. You believe in that analysis yourself, because in order to correct the dysfunction of how it was written and how it's implemented, you must first examine it to come to a place of reform or remedy. That's what critical race theory teaches.
Well, I failed to see any of the quote unquote critical race theory analyses, I guess. So that's not what I'm seeing, but I am seeing, but I have been seeing the products of that. And I've seen a lot of irate parents with school children, and they are blaming critical race theory. So your critical race theory needs a branding solution, because the branding on it is terrible right now.
So you're blaming critical race theory that has been around since 1958, that was formalized in the 1970s, only became a boogeyman under Donald Trump. You're blaming critical race theory for the outrageous criminal behavior of parents at school boards.
No, first of all, I didn't mention any outrageous criminal behavior. I haven't seen any, but
you haven't seen parents fight at school boards?
I can't make a commentary on the fact that nobody noticed that this was happening until just recently, because the schools have been very mum on this issue, and they've been ushering critical race theory in over the past decades.
It's true. Teach critical race theory in K through 12 education. Don't you find it ironic that
I'm sorry, if you talk over me, I can't hear you, and then I feel like you can't hear me.
There's no one teaching critical race theory in K through 12 education.
I know you've said that, and yet they themselves say that they're teaching it. So I don't know what to tell you. I'm talking about the stuff that they're teaching.
What teacher?
Not the stuff perhaps that you're talking about. I'm talking about what they're admitting is critical race theory. I can't speak to the stuff that you're saying. Look, it's easy to do that. It's easy to say, oh, but that's not critical race. This is a terrible thing that they're teaching. And you can say to me, oh, I agree that that's terrible, but that's not critical race theory.
No,
that's
I don't agree that it's terrible.
In the book. I don't know what else you want to call it.
I do not agree that teaching the true history of America is terrible. I don't agree with that at all. I'm simply making a factual observation that critical race theory, which is a defined thing, critical race theory is not something for you to artificially define. It is a definite. There's a definition of critical race theory. There's a practice, there's an art, there's a research practicum. This is not critical race theory. That's it. We can move on to the next topic, okay?
Okay.
You brought up masks, right? And parents, obviously they are going to school boards. We've highlighted criminal parents on this show, fighting other students, fighting school board members, threatening medical directors, trying to run them off the road, making threats to school board members on or during public comment. So we've seen all of this happen. Do you believe that a mask mandate at a local school is a constitutional intrusion?
Yes, but I believe that school is a constitutional intrusion.
Explain.
Well, I don't believe that the government really has the right to require children to be institutionalized.
They don't. You don't have to go to school.
Right.
So what are you talking about? You do not have to go to school. Parents can make a decision to not have a child in a public school. So where's the constitutional violation?
Well, the schools require the students to show up or face truancy, and the government has, and various state governments have their requirements for home education if you're choosing not to go to school. So basically, by default, they make it almost untenable for parents to educate their kids at home and or avoid the mask mandate. So then the mask mandate is then sort of grandfathered into all of that.
Really interesting. Let me take you to Amendment 10 of the Constitution, because you said the school boards are unconstitutional, or schools are unconstitutional, correct?
Well, the mandate, yeah.
Well, the mandate can't be unconstitutional if the school is constitutional, because the 10th Amendment of the US Constitution says that where the federal government is silent, states can make a state law. And by state law, they, through statute, create school boards. And school boards, through that statute, have administrative ability. They can enact what's called administrative law. So are you saying that schools are unconstitutional, or are just school mask mandates unconstitutional?
Well, I think that they're wading into some very tenuous territory with the mask mandates, and they ought to be careful. We've already seen deleterious effects of mask wearing on children, and the fact is, of course, that the masks are completely unhygienic, and so there have been so many different reports of problems with the masks. That the schools are, of course, the big problem is that the schools are in charge of education. So you would think that they would be up to speed on all of the different issues regarding the masks, but they seem not to be. They seem to be simply making knee-jerk decisions about masks.
93% of science, 93% of infectious disease scientists agree that mask mandates significantly decrease the spread of COVID. As a matter of fact, not even 1% of infectious disease.
If only science was decided by consensus, that would be awesome.
Allow me to finish. These scientists who have conducted independent research and also collective research, they do believe that yes, COVID-19 is significantly decreased by wearing a mask. Now let me go back to your initial argument about school mandates of mask wearing. Do you think it is illegal for schools to mandate vaccines?
Oh yeah.
They already do. 100% of public schools have a vaccine regimen requirement. That's a state law, by the way. All 50 states have that law. It is not a federal law. And 93% of all private institutions, 92.8% of all private institutions. Just
because they do it doesn't make it right.
So you're saying that your fight is actually, so why haven't you been fighting the vaccine mandate?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Schools have been able to enact vaccine mandates on children for decades. Have you ever protested the vaccine mandate?
Have I ever protested it? Why?
Right, because you think it's an intrusion on children. You think the mask.
I do, but it's not.
So why have you not protested?
But that's not the fight that I chose to. That's not the hill I chose to die on, so to speak.
So you want to down the
mask? But yeah, the vaccine right now.
No, I'm just talking about
the vaccine right now is against the Nuremberg Code.
If we're having a discussion about intrusion and civil liberties, then to have intellectual integrity in the argument, you would have to believe that if a school system does not have the constitutional right or the statutory authority to implement a mask mandate, that they don't have the authority to mandate vaccinations. They don't have the authority to enforce.
Well, a vaccine is an invasion of body privacy.
But it's already law. Are you protesting that as well?
Well, it's law, and yet there are workarounds. So
there are workarounds to all of it.
Right.
Religious exemption, medical exemption,
right, which they've already sort of mitigated for. Except this vaccine, this new one.
There's no vaccine mandate. What are you talking about? There is no vaccine mandate.
Well, there is in New York. That's why you have a number of people that are quitting their jobs now.
You know, the mandate that I'm referring to is when you all call the Biden executive order a vaccine mandate. You don't agree with that. You know that's not a mandate.
I'm sorry, I'm confused.
The vaccine protocol through the executive action of Biden, which says that if you are an employee at a company with 100 employees or more,
right,
that you either A, have to get vaccinated, or B, not get vaccinated, and you have to take a test once a week. That's not a COVID vaccine mandate, correct?
It sounds like a mandate to me.
Or you cannot get the vaccine.
I beg your pardon?
You can also not get the vaccine and just take a test.
Yes.
So it's not a mandate.
Well.
All right, I gotta go. It's been fun. I appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much.